The Archie Sonic comics mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. For some, it's a time capsule back to the Sonic franchise's wildest days. Others miss its storytelling, and some people are here to see art so bad it's good. The art of Archie Sonic is all over the place, from pencilers who could bring Sonic and friends to life in a way no video game could to, that. It's understandable why just looking at the book gives some people secondhand embarrassment sometimes. But you know what? Even through the series' highs and lows, the actual art in the comics have a hell of a lot more hits than misses. And so, in dedication to a comic I loved so much growing up, I wanted to put together a list of the most important artists in Archie Sonic history and give some of these guys their much-deserved flowers. And what better way to kick us off than with the artist who started it all. The first artist the series ever had, Dave Manak and original writer Mike Gallagher defined the early look and feel of the comic. With Gallagher providing cheesy but endearing writing, Manak leaned heavily into the way Sonic looked in American cartoons at the time. The mohawk quills are in, the hot dog nose is firmly planted on Sonic's face, and his body is overall a little pudgy, fitting for American Sonic. Manak also handled Sally Acorn's early look. Before being a redhead in a jean jacket, this pink-furred, black-haired Sally is definitely a change of pace from the way she looks throughout the rest of the series. She, and the rest of the Freedom Fighters when drawn by Manak in this era, look like they were ripped straight out of a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. And for the early comedy-driven stories of the book, they're quite appropriate. Though I have a hard time imagining Manak's kiddie cartoon style being used in some of the more dramatic stories the book would go on to tell. Oh, by the way, have you ever seen this Alone Again on Friday Night meme floating around the internet? If you have, well, that panel was drawn by Dave Manak way back in issue 9. Honestly, while the meme itself is pretty funny, the whole page in context is worth a read. Give it a look. Anyways, if I had to give Manak a ranking, I'd probably put him in C tier. Also, yeah, this is a tier list video now. It helps with viewer retention. There's so many artists that came after him that I think did a better job with these characters, but out of respect for the clear skill that was there, I think he's a perfect reference point to measure other artists on. If you're better than Manak, you're probably pretty good. And if you're worse, you probably suck. And for the first artist in the series' history to still hold up against plenty of artists that came and went in the book's 24-year run, I'd say that's pretty impressive. Speaking of defining the early look of the comics, Art Mawhinney was one of the earliest and longest running artists in the book. The second penciler in series history, he had work featured all the way into issue 156. Of the early artists, I'd say he's probably the most consistent out of the group. I can always tell it's him by the way he uses one continuous rounded curve from the bottom of the nose to the top of the mouth. There's something so classic Looney Tunes about that. Actually, speaking of old cartoons, Mawhinney was quite qualified for his gig with Archie Sonic. It turns out he was one of the main storyboard artists on staff for the original Sonic Saturday Morning cartoon. Yep, see, there he is in the credits. Art's work is the closest the comic gets to looking like Sad AM, and it's clear that that's the style he was most comfortable drawing over time. You gotta remember, he stayed on the book from 1994 through 2005, but even deep into the franchise's visual redesign, he was the final holdout on using classic Sonic proportions. It's like he clearly got the message to give Sonic longer quills and limbs, but I guess he decided to keep dancing with the one who brought him to the ball, cause what the fuck is this shit, Art? The book was deep into silly season by this point in Art's run, so he drew the short end of the stick of having to draw some of Archie Sonic's more out there stories. The upshot of that, though, is that you get to see some of the modern Sonic exclusive characters in a classic styling, done by a guy who worked on Sad AM. Here's Shadow just chilling in a tree, minding his own business. Rouge gets a complete costume change, and Modern Eggman... yeah, I think Mawhinney was more comfortable with the old Robotnik design. Still, even if he never reached the heights of some others that I'm going to rank today, Mawhinney's art remains one of the most consistent bright spots through the series' early years. For that, he gets a B. Nice job, Art. Patrick Spaziante is the greatest Sonic cover artist. Full stop. For a guy who was on the book so early on, I don't think there was anyone else whose understanding of artistic fundamentals meshed so seamlessly with the Sonic art style. I think he had the strongest grasp on composition out of anyone who did cover art for the book. Take issue 48's cover as an example. Both subjects in frame, that being Sonic, the convict on the run, for reasons we won't get into right now, and Geoffrey St. John, the pursuer, are roughly placed on opposite thirds of the canvas. Sonic is up front and in the foreground, posed in a way that you can almost feel like he's about to tip over off the page as he's checking his blind spot. This look, along with the cave itself tunneling towards the bottom left side of the page, draws your eyes to Geoffrey and his team in the background, silhouetted by the light of the entrance to the cave they're chasing Sonic into. That use of black and white, plus the placement in the background, almost others the crew as a foreboding, looming presence tracking a distressed Sonic in rusted, broken shackles. Add in the muzzle flash of Geoffrey's blaster for added contrast, along with rubble kicked up by a missed shot in the mid-ground between both subjects, and what you have is a masterclass in how to establish motion, depth, and narrative into a single, two-dimensional image. It's beautiful, man. And that's just one issue. This type of attention to detail can be found in just about any cover Spaz drew on his run on Sonic. Speaking of detail, let's talk about the figures themselves for a moment. Out of all the people who worked on Archie Sonic, I think Spaz was the one who best understood Sonic character anatomy from the jump. Limbs and torsos are properly sized so as not to feel pudgy, there's more space used for the eyes and muzzle, giving Sonic more room to emote, the hot dog nose is gone, and things are stylistically much closer to the original Japanese design without ever fully throwing away American influences. I know we've already talked about attention to detail with them, but I do want to say I think Spaz drew the best hands out of any Sonic artist that worked on the series. They're a little more detailed than most pencilers are willing to go with the characters, but they're posed so dramatically the added bone structure works to his advantage. Very Gil Kane-esque if you ask me. Speaking of Spaziante's work reminding me of other famous comic artists, here's this dope cover of Sonic trapped in a spider's web. It feels a lot like Todd McFarlane's famous Spider-Man 1 cover in 1990, doesn't it? Spaz even included McFarlane's famous spaghetti webbing, which is a nice touch. And again, look at the hands contorting into this desperate struggle for freedom. I mean, who is this guy? Fucking Tua on primetime football? Get the fuck out of here. Let's talk about one of Spaz's calling cards. His love for a stall. For those not in the know, a stall was a 2D platformer released on the Sega Saturn back in 1995. And he clearly left an impression on Spaz because he stuck him in as a cameo in at least 4 different issues. I think Astall's design is a pretty natural fit for the Sonic universe, so it's easy to assume he's just another background character if you don't know what you're looking for. But there's no shot these cameos were approved by corporate at all. I don't know, it's just an interesting little relic of how hands-off Sega used to be with the Sonic IP, that an artist could sneak in references like this without anyone noticing. Kinda miss when these creatives had that kind of freedom with this franchise. Here's another oddity of Spaziante's work for Archie Sonic, the tabloid covers. This was around the time the book was adopting a 3 stories per issue format, and the covers' designs were changed to reflect that. Hedgehog dating tips 101, Mina the mongoose takes notes and she's gotta have 'em. Yeah, this wasn't exactly one of the book's strongest eras. 115 even featured several pages of concept art that he produced for the book, from environments to character redesigns, even cover artwork for issue 113, which I gotta say, looks a lot better than the final product. Actually, that issue's known for surprisingly terrible art, but that's a whole other can of worms I won't get into. Anyways, being that he was the most prolific cover artist, I figured I'd give y'all a montage of some of my favorite Spaziante covers over the years, so here you go. Yeah, do I even need to say it? Easiest S tier in my life. Alright, before we leave this early era of the Archie Sonic comics, if there's anything you know about the people who contributed to the book, you know there's one guy's work I haven't mentioned yet. So, without further ado... Alright, I won't dunk on Ken Penders too much. At the end of the day, he was one of the driving forces behind shifting the comic from a monthly children's comedy to a long-term narrative. And for that, I'll always appreciate his work, even if I don't really like his dialogue, or most of his plots. And I could take or leave most of his original characters, and yeah, I'll stop there. I don't know how else to put this, but Ken's Sonic art makes me uncomfortable. There's plenty of funny, so bad it's good panels from others in the book's run, but man, Penders' work is nestled deep in the uncanny valley. I think it's the way he draws eyes and lips that does it for me. Eyes have massive, unnecessary highlights. The bottom lips are small yet strongly defined. And those limbs, man, woof. He definitely didn't have as strong of a grasp on perspective or depth as some of the others. But to be honest, guys, I can only clown him so much. He's the only person throughout the comics run that's credited with all 5 major roles in production. I mean, he was a key writer for years, penciled, inked, lettered, and colored at some point over his 12-year run in the book. Not to mention he wrote his entire Knuckles side comic throughout this time, so yeah, I'm willing to give the guy a little bit of grace. Looking at some of his other work on Star Trek and The Lost Ones, clearly he's more comfortable drawing humans than hedgehogs, even if his non-Sonic art still doesn't blow me away. But man, his Sonic art is just ass. Sorry, Ken, someone's gotta be down near the bottom. You get an F. Now, after around issue 50 of the comic, the series began to veer off in wild directions. This was due in large part to the creative team behind the comic assuming the book wasn't going to last much longer, as Sonic SatAM's 3rd season had just recently been cancelled, therefore having very little material from the cartoon to work off of. Additionally, the writers more or less wrote themselves into a corner after killing Dr. Robotnik at the end of the Endgame arc. This set the stage for new villains and side characters to be introduced as the focus turned towards developing Sonic and his motley crew of freedom fighters. This era of disorder led to an influx of new artists coming in to work on Archie Sonic, and that was coupled with plenty of experimentation in both the writing and art departments, especially after the release of Sonic Adventure caused a shift in the character design within the comic. This was by far the series' most spontaneous, varied period with plenty of mistakes, a few standout stories, and some of the craziest art you'll see in an official video game adaptation. If there's anyone associated with wacky art in Archie Sonic, it's Ron Lim, and it's not entirely fair. Sure, his art style is definitely out there. The long, angular spines, massive mono eye with rectangular irises, and overall lengthy proportions feel out of place. Faces in particular never feel quite right. I don't think there's a single character he drew that didn't look like it was ripped out of an early 2000s GameStop box. Lim became a regular feature in the book right as things were starting to go off the rails story-wise, so you're pairing one of the most unorthodox artists with some of the worst stories told in Archie Sonic. He never really got much better over the course of his run either. He was so off-model from start to finish that I wonder if he even looked at official game art as a reference. I mean, you can't turn in a panel like this at the end of an issue and expect me to rank your art very high. Now, if you go look at his work on Silver Surfer or X-Men, all of a sudden the guy's a badass. He's just one of those artists that was trained to draw superheroes, not furries, and because of that I can't really blame the guy. I respect his talent and boldness to be different, but holy hell, I'm glad he never drew Sonic again. Yeah, this has got to go down in F tier.
Jet Set Radio.
you had Spaziante's cover quality and gave it some Y2K edge, you'd have Jay Axer. Big expressions, big gloves, big guns, you name it. Maybe the most detailed artist on the list, Axer's art is damn beautiful. The effort he puts into hair in particular is jaw-dropping. Look at all these curls. Genuinely some of the best looking hair I've seen in comics and manga. I also think his art style was perfect for adapting Yuji Uekawa's adventure artwork. Limbs have the added length that they need without looking awkward, and Sonic's spines are thick and heavy, like massive locks of hair being dragged to the ground. Ears are more curved and given a little extra meat than most Sonic artists give, brows are big and expressive, and pair all of that with some radical posing? Yeah, this is early 2000s Sonic at his best. Axer's hiring was actually a bit of a watershed moment in the Sonic community. He got his start making furry art on his own time, some of which included Sonic fan art. He was eventually approached to pencil for the series by writer Carl Bollers, and when he was brought onto the team, he became the first fan artist to work on the Sonic franchise in an official capacity. And I can see why the Archie crew were so interested. Check out some of these pieces of fan art he drew back in 2001. I was not expecting to dig Sonic pointing in 1911 so much, but the amount of detail Axer packed into this image is insane. He really captures the rebellious attitude Sonic brings as a character, which I'd say he ended up bringing to the comic later on. Impressive stuff. Unfortunately, he didn't have a very large volume of work on the comic, despite being on the book for about 3 years. Much of that was due to being relegated to frontispieces on most of the issues he worked on due to a busy schedule. The upside of that is that he got to do what he does best, creating a single, dense, polished piece of art. And I gotta say, most of these came out great. Check out this piece for 117. I think it'd stand up with some of the best covers the series ever had. 118's cover is just as good with one of the wilder Mecha Sonic designs we've seen over the years, not to mention his ability to flex his great texturing on metal objects. There's something so immediately striking to most of his compositions, even if you let them get a little too busy sometimes. Like, carving out every bubble in this bottle looks beautiful and all in a frontispiece, but did every single blade of grass need to be drawn in a panel like this one? Maybe not. I also think his figures could have been a bit more dynamic in some scenes, this Rouge and Bunny fight being particularly stiff, but I'm nitpicking at this point. As it stands, Axer only penciled for actual stories in 12 issues over his 3-year run on Archie Sonic, and that's a damn shame. Like I've mentioned before, the comic storytelling was off in the wilderness by the time he was working on the book, so he got dealt a couple of duds in his time. I mean, he had a precious 12 issues where he touched the interiors, and you're telling me they wasted one of them on the issue where the gang goes back to school? The fuck is this shit, man? Maybe my favorite story he worked on was Heart Held Hostage, where he somehow managed to sneak in realistic guns into a Sonic comic. Sally walks herself out of a hostage situation while packing heat, Sonic plays the guitar, Mina Mongoose gets shot. I mean, the story's got it all. There's actually a lot of background info around this story, most of which was shared by Axer himself on his DeviantArt page. But if we spend time breaking down the granular changes from different stages in production, we'd be here all day. As for the ranking, I'll be so bold as to put him into S tier. My GOAT was on a Terrell Davis run to a short and sweet Hall of Fame career in Sonic comics. He's probably my favorite artist throughout the whole book's run. It's criminal he never got to do a cover. Probably the longest running artist out of all these guys, Stephen Butler clocked in a staggering 15 years drawing for Archie Sonic. To put that into perspective, his tenure lived through 4 Yankees championships, 3 presidencies, and 2 towers. To be honest, I'd completely forgotten about his early work on the series, and going back to it for this video, it was great. I think outside of having slightly more elongated eyes, particularly for comic original characters, Butler had an amazing grasp on classic Sonic's proportions and character design. Environments are detailed without being too busy, expressions are dramatic, and he's even using solid, readable page layouts. Yeah, early Steve Butler kicked ass. So, why don't I remember him as a regular penciler on the book? Well, let's just say I don't think he handled the transition to modern Sonic proportions as well as he could have. Eyes got further elongated, he started adding more highlights to the irises, to the point where the female characters looked more like furry Sailor Moon OCs than Sonic characters.
An American! There's an American among us.
Not to mention the change in limb length possessed him to, for some ungodly reason, add knees to legs that were not designed to have them. Moreover, he was the sorry soul who had to draw Ken Penders' Mobius 25 years later arc, and I wouldn't wish that fate on my worst enemy. I don't think a single one of these redesigns looked good, probably because they're so lanky. This is hands down one of my least favorite stories in all of Archie Sonic. I will note though that Butler would eventually settle into the modern designs. Particularly by the end of his run in the early to mid 200s, he was one of the best artists on the book with Tracy Yardley and Ben Bates. Check out these shots of the Iron Queen, or this sequence of Joffrey crashing out in court. Or can I interest you in the most intimidating Eggman you'll find this side of Sonic.exe? So I'm at a bit of a loss on how to rank him. His early stuff was some of the best interior art in the book at the time, and his later work was still quite strong, even if I think he never fully adjusted to the modern Sonic proportions, torsos in particular. Some of that art in the middle though, yeah, not the best. I think I'll settle him in at A tier actually. I walked away much more impressed with Steve Butler's body of work than I was expecting to. I guess that 25 years later arc left such a bad taste in my mouth it overpowered everything else he did in my mind. Talk about one hell of a trauma response. One of the most unique artists in Archie Sonic, Jon Gray's pencils make the Sonic crew look like they just took a trip to Toon World. Figures are particularly rounded, especially heads, lending itself to cartoonish facial expressions. His compositions are also dense, like, holy shit, you didn't need to do all that kind of dense. Where Jay Axer was obsessed with drawing every blade of grass in a scene, Gray lives on squeezing every last bit of characterization into a frame. Whether it's holding up bunny ears, waving signs, grading landings, fucking snoring, I swear everyone's doing something in the background of a Jon Gray page. I think the word that comes to mind for his art style is bubbly. Everything has an almost chibi level of stylization to it. Now whether that's palatable to your personal taste, well, you've probably already made up your mind after just a couple of pages. Some might not dig the narrow eyes he gave some characters or the cutesy aesthetic, and I get that. The style could get in the way of some more serious narrative beats at times. The big one being the infamous slap scene in issue 134. There's a lot of baggage that comes with this moment in the comics history. I'll touch on it again at some point when I come back to the series to cover it more in depth, but what matters right now is that this one panel got Jon Gray in a lot of heat with longtime fans back in 04, and because of that, he had some more critical eyes on his art style. Another quirk of Gray's work is that he seemed to really get a kick out of using these cartoonified, censored cuss words, because he used them many times, context be damned. Take the Return to Angel Island arc as an example. I'm trying to follow along a serious moment and General Kage's eating shit Looney Tunes style. Did this speech bubble really need to be here for this gag to land? You got some other oddities like this, like background characters making goofy faces or poses, but you know what? I like it. He's the only artist that was radically different from official artwork and stuck the landing. Jon Gray's art is fun to look at, the use of deep blacks make expressions pop, and there's even Easter eggs in the background to look for. Here's a Nighttopian from Nights into Dreams just chilling with Charmy and Saffron, and check out all the chow that are littered around the place. So I'm gonna go ahead and give Jon a B. I don't know if I'd daily drive a comic with this art style, but as a lead artist in a side story, or a main penciler for 2 to 3 main issues a year, yeah, I'd take that. Now, when Gray was drawing for Archie Sonic, the book had reached its breaking point in the writing department. Their adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2 was particularly messy, and the years of offbeat narrative choices were piling up. Archie made changes in the creative department, the most important of which was hiring Ian Flynn to become the head writer for Archie Sonic, a title he carried till the end of the comic in 2017. Paired with him, though, was bringing on a little-known artist named Tracy Yardley as one of the main artists on the book, and this combination alone would define Archie Sonic for the final 10 years of its life. Tracy Yardley's art is such a foundational part of the Archie Sonic experience to me that I don't really know where to start, so I'm just gonna pick something and build from there. The biggest thing about Yardley's work to me is how streamlined everything is. You don't really notice at first glance why things seem to feel right, but the longer I look at these Yardley pages, the more I'm convinced this guy was a master of his craft. Let's talk about page layouts for a second, because it's maybe one of the least appreciated aspects of comic art. I'd go deeper into the nuances, but I think this sample page in 169 does a great job of showing how good layouts can transform the comic reading experience. Starting at the top left, Tails and Shadows' poses have them facing towards the right side of the page, leading the reader to see the portal Shadow just created. The speech bubbles on these two panels are also placed in a way to lead the reader's eye. The left panel's dialogue leading the reader to see the characters, and the right's making the reader look further down the page. The speech bubbles' placement then draws the eye towards the Tails reaction shot as you sweep back to the right side of the page to continue reading, where Yardley continues the pattern of making you read the subsequent dialogue before another reveal shot of all the Chaos Emeralds being sucked into the portal. The page then ends with this shot of text in the middle with some great expressions on both characters. Each one of these elements creates small beats you take when reading the page. It's specifically crafted so that your brain has an easy time absorbing the information. Story moments are timed to the order and pace at which the audience reads the panels. Oh, and the art itself kicks ass too. Just beautiful. And this page was so early on in his run too. Something else he simplified in his art was character anatomy. He really leaned into giving every character Sonic-like detail in the limbs, meaning no awkward human muscles and little to no bones showing at the joints. Finally, everyone in this universe has a cohesive, streamlined look to them, and it looks great. Some other small things about his art style that I've always liked is the blockiness of the hands. Again, the anatomy is simplified, giving them a more cartoonish feel without losing any of the dynamism in their posing. An artist for the concussed, if you will. Actually, many aspects of the characters, like brows, mouths, etc., have a very solid, blocky feel. He's definitely a lot more angular in his lines than other artists, and I think it works out in his favor. As much as I love his interior work, I'm almost more impressed with some of the covers that he drew over the years, and he drew a lot. To put into perspective just how much he drew for Archie Sonic, Yardley drew 60 issues of the mainline book, 69 issues of Sonic Universe, 59 covers of mainline, and 78 covers of Sonic Universe. So, starting with his debut in 160, he drew 46% of the remaining interiors and 45% of the covers, which means that in this 290-issue comic, a fifth of the interiors and covers are Tracy Yardley alone. And for Sonic Universe, he penciled for 73% of the issues, and a shocking 82% of that series is covers. All tallied up, that's 129 penciling credits and 137 covers. My God. It's because of this crazy volume of high-quality work that I think Tracy Yardley is so strongly remembered. Pair that with the fact that he debuted alongside the book's new head writer Ian Flynn, and to me, you get Archie Sonic's defining look and feel. The Flynn-Yardley combo is Archie Sonic for me. They're the duo that spearheaded my favorite stories in Sonic history, brought some of the coolest characters to life, and revisiting their work, I was very happy to find that most of it still holds up great today. Do I even need to say it? Yardley goes straight into S tier. I know some people might balk at him being the greatest Sonic comic artist of all time, but I'd argue he's probably the most important. And for me, it really was a pleasure to revisit his old work. What an artist. Since Yardley did so much work around this time, there were only a few more artists that even touched the interiors for Archie Sonic. In the interest of time, I'm going to deliberately gloss over many of them, even the ones that contributed the most as Yardley began to phase out of the book. Specifically, Evan Stanley and Adam Bryce Thomas were probably the two best artists as the book got closer to its cancellation in 2017. I'd talk about them more, but honestly, I think their best work came a few years later in the IDW series, and I'd rather save my thoughts on the two for when I get around to talking about that comic. Well, that and I'm running out of ways to say that I like pretty drawings. The only other artist I'll note for today then will be Ben Bates. A very underrated cover artist, I think Bates is quietly number 2 behind Spaz, and if he had a higher volume of work, he might be number 1. His art feels like a great mix between Spaziante and Yardley. Bonus points for the dynamism he puts in his figures, especially later on in his few penciling opportunities. Check out this sick shot of St. John in 223. Metal as fuck, man. I also appreciate this awesome 4-cover series between 253 and 256. And who could forget 252's iconic cover? This might be my favorite cover in the whole series. Gorgeous use of splatter effects, lighting, and highlights. Compositionally sound, what more do you want? My only knock against him is, well, we just didn't get to see much of him. He worked on 11 issues worth of interiors, drew 20 covers, and that was it. Very short and sweet, a bit like Jay Axer, but he put in great work nonetheless. I'm gonna go ahead and slot him into A tier. I think his art is S-caliber work, but if I'm gonna put someone into S tier, I want them to be stylistically unique, have the longevity to appreciate their work over time, and to have a great grasp of the artistic fundamentals. And at the end of the day, I don't think Bates had the longevity for me to push him over the edge. That's just my opinion though. And if you disagree, well, it's my list, dude. If you don't like it, post your own in the comments. I don't care. I'm not your dad. Anyways, folks, that's about all I have for you today. Obviously, this wasn't an exhaustive list. There were plenty of artists that only touched a couple of issues throughout the Archie run that I didn't talk about. I just wanted to pick out which artist not only had the highest volume of work throughout the book's run, but also that stood out the most. The Archie Sonic comics mean a lot to me, and if they mean something to you too, I hope this look at some of the book's greatest artists was as fun of a stroll down memory lane for you as it was for me. Thanks for watching. Hug your mom, tell your family you love them, and God bless.